the opening piece in the fourth book of the Java Suite is called In the Kraton. And in my estimation, this is the true heart of the cycle, the most fabulous piece, the most original, and the one that probes the deepest in some ways. I would say the Java Suite has three sort of slow movements, the one being Borobudur in book 2. Then we have the Garden of Beutenzorg, which is a kind of a slow movement in book 3. And then this In the Kraton, which opens book 4. And there is a sort of progression in the depths that they reach, finishing here within the Kraton. So I see it in some ways as a sort of reverse of the Garden of Beutenzorg. I did talk then about the way this piece seems to be trying to hang on to something that is stable against a background of impermanence. So by this shifting chromaticism, on which this melody is trying to get a footing in some ways. The Kraton works kind of exactly in the opposite way. It's a world which is in itself incredibly busy and active, always in motion, and yet at the same time the overall impression is of something that is completely static. If you wanted to philosophically understand this, it would be something like the movement of the natural motion of the earth and the seasons, and which are completely immutable, on the background of which we have our lives in which we are always busy and trying to do things and trying to think we are important. And yet, if you stand back and if you look at the earth of the cosmos, you see that there is an orderliness and something that is never changing in some sort of ways. That's exactly what this piece transmits. So, well, how does it do that? Well, apart from the first piece, gamelan, this is really the one piece that evokes the most the sound of the Javanese gamelan. And it's also the one of two pieces in the cycle that is almost entirely diatonic. And when I say almost, I mean 99.99999%. The scale being... And for the 5 or so minutes, and this is perhaps the longest piece in this cycle, there are no other notes than that, except for one at the end. So I'll just show you how it starts. So you see, on one level, a lot happens, and on another level, nothing happens. So the music gets gradually faster and more busy, and the texture becomes more dense. But at the same time, we haven't gone anywhere. We are still exactly at the starting point. Now, the way he achieves this is because the pedal of C sharp, which you hear right at the beginning of the top, or here, is never really going away. So the music is still rooted firmly on this basic chord, and that will remain for a lot of the piece. And sometimes the fundamental note changes, so you will have a... So the note then is not C, it becomes a G sharp. But the principle is the same. Then a lot of things happen on this background that stabilizes the music and in fact prevents it from moving and from truly going anywhere. Now, with that, we still have some sort of a form. It feels very free-flowing and improvised. In fact, it is rather sophisticated, and I won't go into the full details of it, but still, it's worth noting. So this is a kind of opening, almost like an introduction, presenting some material. And that is going to be almost seminal in the piece. But still, with this, we don't really have anything to really hang on. The first time something like a theme appears comes quite a bit later, when we have a theme which does. And as many themes in the Java suite, it is an incredible theme, incredibly short and narrow in terms of range theme. It only uses 3 notes. And on that, Godowsky builds what could be called a sort of theme and variation, by which I mean he will simply repeat it and change the texture. So it's somewhere in between a theme and variation and a pasakai. And of course, those of you who know Godowsky will know that if he's famous for anything he has written, is this monstrous pasakai on the Schubert Unfinished Symphony. Monstrous in terms of proportion. So that theme will be transformed and transformed, and then comes something interesting. We have another theme which does. Which has absolutely the flavor of a popular tune from that part of the world, and I don't know whether it's an original melody or not. He is also going to build a theme and variation on that one, but the first time we hear it, it's overlapping with the preceding theme. So and then it takes over and we hear it on its own. And so on. And with that there will be a sort of a build-up and a climax, and then a gradually receding. So in some ways the piece is an arch. After that, there is one more thing that I'd like to mention, because it's in the mood of this piece, it wasn't exactly expected, and structurally it wasn't either. We reach a point where the music seems to be falling into something directionless, and then we get it rises again. And then we launch onto something, a new episode that is interestingly built entirely on a tiny little motif that was absolutely secondary in the building work leading to that transition. This one. And it's like someone improvising and stumbling onto some piece of material and think, yeah, I can do something with that. It does remind very much of the way sometimes Schubert composes, even when he tries to be formal. And he has this knack of playing with his material, even when it's not important and not promising. So I'm thinking in his One But Last Sonata, when we have... and then he does a tiny variation. And in fact, his whole development will be built not on anything else almost, but just this little variation. And it feels very much like a child playing with a new toy. And Godowsky acts in a little bit this way. So. So what he builds, as you can hear, is a sort of a lullaby, really. That's what's the best description one could give. And it's interesting because in this piece, which seems to be in some ways devoid of human feeling, that is a very human moment. A lullaby is a very human activity. But it is not the lulling of a child going to sleep. It is more the lulling of a sort of an existential pain in some ways. The pain of trying to find meaning in this life with this permanent activity that seems in this piece to go nowhere ever and to be always enclosed. And so, yeah, there is this feeling of tenderness, almost of compassion that emanate from this absolutely beautiful section. And after that, well, the piece really gradually fizzles away. It tries to raise to a sort of burst of activity, but it's completely futile. A last occurrence of one of the themes with the only non-diatonic note in the piece, which you will hear. So I took a bit of time over that one, and I apologize for it, but I really think it's quite a special work, and the depths it probes mean there is a little more to say about it.